Leave. You're bothering me, he told me when I caught him on a candlelit date with his new co-worker. After 5 years of marriage, I was supposed to shrink away, apologize, and go home crying. He had spent years twisting my reality, making me believe that every problem in our relationship was my fault. But he forgot one crucial detail. I process divorce files for a living. When I opened our shared family tablet at 3 a.m. and found a secret message from his mother reading, "The prenup expired today." The blindfold finally came off. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. Instead, I quietly spent the next 3 weeks using my legal experience to build a flawless, color-coded, time-stamped case against the man I married. When he proudly marched into my law firm to publicly humiliate me and force me to back down, he walked right into a trap he never saw coming. Yellow light catching on glass. A laugh. The sound cut through the soft jazz spilling out of an open restaurant door. The smell of roasted garlic and sweet basil. Plastic grocery handles dug tight into my palms. A carton of milk sweated through the brown paper bag, pressing freezing cold against my thigh. I stopped walking. My feet just planted themselves on the uneven brick sidewalk. I did not know why. I looked through the wide window of Sal's bistro. The corner table. A candle flickering in a small glass jar. A man sat facing the street, but his eyes were locked on the woman across from him. The familiar line of his jaw. The way he leaned forward to command the space. Colton. His arm rested casually over the back of her chair. A tall bottle of red wine sat between them. Colton did not drink wine at home because he always said he hated the taste. They were leaning over a single menu. She smiled and tilted her head. Her hair was dark and fell past her bare shoulders. She looked my age. Maybe younger. The candlelight caught on a thin silver necklace resting against her collarbone. The grocery bags grew heavier. The cold dampness from the milk seeped through my work trousers. I pushed the heavy wooden door open and stepped inside. I did not plan it. My feet moved before my brain could assemble a single thought. Colton looked up. 1 second passed. His eyes widened, and then the mask slipped perfectly into place. It happened so fast that if I had blinked, I would have missed it. "Tara, what are you doing here?" His voice sounded completely calm. There was no guilt, just a thick layer of annoyance. The woman looked up. Her smile faded into polite confusion. "Tara, this is Peyton," Colton said. "From the dealership, we are going over the new quarter projections." Peyton looked at me. I looked at the tall glasses of wine, the flickering candle, the single menu. This restaurant did not serve quarter projections. They served tiramisu and live jazz on Thursday nights. I opened my mouth to speak, but Colton was faster. He stood up and stepped away from the table. His large hand closed over my shoulder, steering me firmly back toward the entrance. His touch felt gentle. It was the specific kind of gentle he used when he needed to control a situation in public. "Babe, you are making a scene," he whispered, leaning close. "Peyton is a colleague. I told you about the new marketing girl. Remember?" "You did not," I said. "I did," he snapped, cutting me off before I could finish my breath. "Last Tuesday." "You never listen, Tara. This is exactly what I mean." He paused and glanced back at Peyton, who was watching us closely. "Look, just go home. You are embarrassing yourself." He dropped his hand from my shoulder. His eyes went entirely hard. "Leave. You are bothering me." The false concern vanished. It was a direct order. I stared up at him. 5 years of marriage compressed into 3 seconds. "My name is Tara Chen. I am 27 years old. I work as a paralegal at a family law firm. I process divorce files all day long. My brain holds the details of 47 broken marriages this year alone. 31 of those cases share the exact same pattern. Deny the facts. Attack the victim. Reverse the roles of victim and offender. I knew the script by heart. I just never realized I was living inside it. "Do not worry," I said quietly. "I am leaving." I turned around and walked out the door. The groceries still hung heavy from my raw hands. Out on the dark sidewalk, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened a blank note. My hands shook violently, but my thumbs typed with smooth muscle memory. I had taken legal notes for 5 years. Thursday, 7:47 in the evening. Sal's Bistro, Colton and female colleague Peyton. Wine. Candle. Sharing. Menu. Physical contact observed. Subject became hostile when confronted. Quote, "Leave, you are bothering me." Step 1. The next morning, the Whitfield and Krause family law office smelled like stale coffee and laser printer toner. I sat at my desk by the window. Client file number 47 lay open across my blotter. The client was a woman who had been blamed for her husband's infidelities for 8 years. I held a yellow marker highlighting a paragraph in the husband's sworn deposition where he called his wife paranoid and unstable. My wrist ached. Colton had texted me those exact words late last night. He wrote that I was being paranoid again, that Peyton was nobody, and that I needed to talk to someone about my stressful job affecting our marriage. Nina Okafor stopped beside my desk. She was the senior attorney and my direct boss. "Tara, the pattern in this deposition is textbook," Nina said, tapping the open folder. "Can you flag every instance for me?" I kept my eyes glued to the highlighted page. I already did. 31 instances across 4 depositions. Nina went perfectly still. 31. In one case. 31, I repeated. My voice sounded hollow and cold. Nina looked at me for a long time. I could feel the weight of her stare pressing against the side of my face, but I refused to look up. Eventually, she walked away. I reached for the handle of my bottom desk drawer and pulled it open to find a black pen. A folded paper sat tucked in the back corner. It was my application for the state bar exam. I had printed it 3 years ago when I wanted to become an attorney. Colton had told me I cared more about a career than building a family. I never mailed it. I stared at the creased white edge for a single second, then shoved the drawer shut. File 47 sat neat and organized on my desk. Red tabs and yellow highlights. Perfect, undeniable evidence of someone else's nightmare. Late that night, the townhouse was completely silent. I stood in the kitchen holding a mug of chamomile tea that had gone freezing cold. The family iPad sat plugged into the wall on the granite counter. A green notification light blinked once and went dark. I heard the heavy front door open and close. Colton dropped his keys on the counter. The metal clattered sharply against the stone. He smelled like a floral perfume that I would never buy because it was far too sweet. "Colton," I said, my voice steady. I had practiced the sentence in my head all day. "I need you to be honest with me about Peyton." He did not even miss a beat. "Are we really doing this again?" He took off his jacket and tossed it over a stool. "I told you, it was a work dinner. We were going over quarter projections. Call the dealership tomorrow if you do not believe me." There was a lit candle on the table, I said. Colton let out a long, exhausted sigh. It sounded incredibly practiced. "Tara, the restaurant puts candles on every single table." "This is exactly what I mean. You read divorce files all day and come home looking for problems. You know what Nina is doing to you. She is making you see things that are not there." My shoulders pulled tight toward my neck. My fingers clamped down hard around the ceramic mug. 5 years of conditioning told my body to shrink, to apologize, to make the tension go away. Deny. Attack. Colton walked slowly across the kitchen. He placed his large, warm hands on my tense shoulders. "Babe," he said softly, "I am worried about you. Honestly. Maybe you should take a break from the firm. The divorce stuff is messing with your head. I am the one who should be upset right now. My own wife ambushed me in front of a new co-worker. Reverse." My brain split completely in half. The old version of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I was ruined by my job. Maybe the restaurant did put candles on every table, but the paralegal inside me saw the structure. I remembered file 47, page 12, highlighted in bright yellow. The husband had said he was worried about her and suggested therapy. Colton was using the exact same words. I nodded slowly. Last night I nodded because I surrendered. Tonight I nodded because I needed him to feel safe. You are right, I whispered. I am sorry. I will think about taking some time off. Colton smiled. It was a broad, easy smile of total victory. He kissed my forehead, picked up his phone, and placed it face down on the counter before heading upstairs to shower. I washed my tea mug in the sink. I dried it and put it away. Oh, Colton called down from the landing. Mum says hi. She's coming down to visit next weekend. Great, I called back. My hands gripped the edge of the sink. Vivian was coming. Why now? At 3 a.m, the bedroom was pitch black. Colton snored loudly beside me. It was the deep, rhythmic breathing of a man who had nothing to hide. I slid out from under the heavy duvet. My bare feet touched the freezing hardwood floor. I walked silently down the stairs and into the kitchen. The iPad still sat on the counter, the tiny green charging light glowing in the dark. I stood in front of it for 30 seconds. My hand hovered over the smooth glass screen. For 5 years, I never touched his devices. I believed in trust. I picked it up and unlocked the screen. The messaging application synced immediately. I scrolled down. I found a thread with Peyton. There were dozens of red heart icons, photos of restaurant menus, and messages mapping out hotel locations. They spanned 3 full months. I did not stop reading. I scrolled further down and opened the message thread with Vivian. My eyes scanned a block of text from 6 weeks ago. Vivian wrote that the sunset clause hit on the 14th. She asked if he had talked to Michaels yet. Colton replied that he had not, but Michaels said once the clause expires, he is clear. Vivian told him not to tell me. She said I would figure it out because I work at a law firm. Colton answered that I never look at our own prenuptial agreement because I am too busy with other people's divorces. Vivian warned him to be careful with the new girl at work. She typed that if it comes out before the clause expires, the agreement still protects me. Colton told her to relax and that he knew what he was doing. Then Vivian sent the final message. You said that about the last one too. I read the screen 3 times. The air in the kitchen felt incredibly thin. A sunset clause is a strict expiration date on a prenuptial agreement. If a couple divorces while the agreement is active, the assets are divided exactly as written, which usually protects the person with less money. If the clause expires, the contract is void, and the state divides everything equally. We signed a 5-year agreement. We had been married for 5 years and 2 months. The clause expired 2 months ago. Colton waited for the exact legal deadline to pass before taking Peyton out in public. His mother knew. His lawyer Michaels knew. They waited for my protection to dissolve. And Peyton was not the first, the last one too. I set the iPad down. I opened the cloud storage application on my phone. I created a new encrypted folder titled with my name. I selected every single message, every timestamp, and every photograph, and I uploaded the entire batch. It was pure muscle memory. I backed up evidence to a separate location every single day at the firm. It was standard practice. I walked over to the stainless steel refrigerator and slid down until I was sitting flat on the cold floor. I cried in total silence for 3 minutes. Then I stood up, wiped my face, and walked back upstairs. I climbed into bed and pulled the covers over my chest. He said that about the last one too. The heavy wooden door to Nina Okafor's office clicked shut. I pulled the horizontal blinds closed. I sat down in the client chair. I had directed hundreds of women to sit in this exact spot before they told their stories. Today, I was the one sitting on the other side of the desk. My phone rested in my lap. I had a digital checklist open. 4 steps completed. My eyes felt dry and heavy. I had cried out all my tears on Saturday. Nina sat across from me. She did not say a single word. She just waited. I placed my phone on the polished mahogany wood and pushed it toward her. I told her I needed to show her something and that I needed her to not be my boss right now. She told me she was listening. I asked her to read from the top. Nina picked up the device. She read the checklist. She looked at the screenshots. She lingered on the messages about the sunset clause. 10 seconds of pure silence passed. It was the longest 10 seconds I had ever counted. When she finally looked up, her voice was different. It was not the sharp tone of a senior attorney. It was the voice of a woman who had lived through this exact moment. She asked me how long the manipulation had been going on. My voice was barely a whisper when I told her I thought it had been happening since the beginning. She raised an eyebrow and emphasized the word thought. I corrected myself. I told her I knew it was 5 years. I explained that I processed these files every single week, that I highlighted 31 instances in the last deposition. I told her I went home and he did the same thing and I just believed him. Nina leaned forward and cut me off. Her voice was gentle but firm. She told me I was not stupid. She said I was conditioned, and there was a massive difference between the two. She pointed at my phone and said the fact that I was sitting in her office with screenshots and a checklist meant the conditioning was cracking. You are not stupid. You are conditioned. I knew I would remember those words for the rest of my life. For 5 years I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was broken because I processed divorce files all day, but failed to recognize I was living inside one. Nina sat back in her chair. She explained that she could not represent me because it was a conflict of interest, but she knew someone. She gave me the name Marlo Davis, a solo practitioner over in Ridgeland. She told me Marlo was thorough, ruthless, and had just won a massive dissipation case last month. I started to say I could not afford a private attorney, but Nina stopped me again. She reminded me that the prenuptial agreement was void. That meant equitable distribution applied. That meant his assets were in play too. I was not the broke one here. I looked down at my phone. Step 5 was to consult an attorney. I mentally checked it off. Nina stood up and opened the window blinds. Bright midday sunlight cut across the room. She turned back to me with one final warning. She told me not to let Colton know I knew about the sunset clause. She called it my ace. If he found out I knew about his mother's involvement, he would move the money, change the narrative, and bring in his lawyer for a preemptive strike. I looked at Nina and told her I knew exactly what he would do, because I processed these files every day. Nina smiled at me for the first time all week. She agreed. The next 7 days split my reality in two. On the surface, I cooked dinner, smiled at the right moments, and apologized whenever Colton needed me to apologize. He acted completely normal. He believed his tactics had worked, and that I had returned to my usual compliant self. On Saturday morning, he grabbed his car keys and told me he had to go meet a client. I stood by the door and told him to drive safe. Beneath that surface, I was building a case. I met with Marlo Davis in her small office. She was brief and sharp. She confirmed the prenuptial agreement was void and explained that we lived in a fault state. She told me adultery, dissipation of assets, and alienation of affection were my 3 weapons. Every night I took more screenshots of the family tablet. I captured messages between Colton and Peyton, and messages between Colton and his mother. I uploaded them all to my personal cloud drive. It was my nightly routine. I organized the files exactly the way I organized client files at the firm. Everything was color-coded by priority, stamped with the exact time and cross-referenced. I opened a separate bank account and transferred $200 from my paycheck. It was a small amount, but it was a beginning. On Tuesday evening, Colton called me from his car to say he would be late because of a new client. I told him it was no problem. He said he loved me. Just as I held the phone to my ear, the tablet on the kitchen counter lit up. It was a new text from Peyton. It contained 4 red heart emojis and an address to a hotel. I looked at the glowing screen and told Colton I loved him too. After he hung up, I took a screenshot and backed it up to my cloud drive. My checklist was growing. 8 out of 14 steps were complete. I had evidence. I had an attorney. I was building financial separation. I had a documentation log. Yet walking around the house pretending everything was fine drained every ounce of my energy. Vivian arrived exactly on schedule the following Saturday. She was 62 years old, wore expensive blonde highlights, and smelled heavily of Chanel No. 5. She placed her designer handbag on the kitchen counter, right next to the charging tablet. She sat at the kitchen island like she owned it. Technically, she did put down the deposit for the townhouse. She looked around the kitchen and noticed the new hand towels hanging by the sink. She asked if I had changed them. I nodded and told her they were on sale at the store. She frowned slightly and said she liked the old ones. She made a point to remind me they were the ones she had picked out when we first moved in. It was a seemingly harmless comment, but I heard it differently now. When she said she picked them out, she really meant everything in this house belonged to her. It was the exact same pattern as my wedding. She chose my dress, she ordered the flowers, she selected the church. Colton sat in the living room watching a football game, entirely oblivious. Vivian lowered her voice and leaned closer to me. She asked how things were going between us. She mentioned Colton said I had been stressed about work. I looked at her and smiled. It was a new smile I had learned from Nina. It was just warm enough to be polite and completely empty behind the eyes. I told her everything was great. Vivian stared at me for a long time. She said that was good because Colton was doing so well at the dealership. She added that she would hate for anything to distract him. I knew exactly what she meant. I was the distraction. If I caused trouble, she would pull her financial support or intervene. I turned back to the sink and washed the dishes. I did not give her a response. She waited 5 full seconds before changing the subject to the weather. Later that night, long after Vivian had driven back to her hotel, the tablet lit up again. It was a new message from Vivian to Colton. She wrote that I did not suspect a thing and told him to proceed. I took a screenshot and uploaded it to the cloud. Step 9 was done. By Wednesday of the second week, I felt a strange sense of power. It was 11 o'clock at night. Colton was asleep. For the first time in 5 years, his phone was resting face up on the wooden nightstand instead of face down. I did not need his phone anymore. I had the tablet. I had my cloud folder filled with screenshots. I had Marlo ready to file the paperwork. My checklist sat at 11 completed steps out of 14. I only needed to file the petition, serve the papers, and execute my exit plan. Lying there in the dark, listening to him snore, I realized I felt stronger than him. I knew everything. He knew absolutely nothing. I was going to win. Then the screen of his phone lit up the dark room. A text notification flashed across the lock screen. I saw it clearly because he had carelessly left it facing the ceiling when he rolled over. The contact name simply read, Dad. My blood ran completely cold. I froze. Colton did not have a father. His father, Ray Webb, had abandoned the family when Colton was 11 years old. Vivian always told everyone they had lost all contact. Colton always told me he did not have a father. But the phone, glowing in the dark, proved otherwise. The text message read to call him back, and that his mother did not need to know. My brain raced to process this new information. There was an entire person I knew nothing about. Ray Webb was secretly communicating with Colton. Vivian did not know, or she was lying about it. Colton was keeping massive secrets from his own mother. This was a third layer of deception. Beneath the affair, beneath the sunset clause, beneath Vivian pulling the strings, there was Ray. I wondered if Ray was helping him hide money or move assets, or maybe Colton simply had an entirely separate life that even Vivian could not control. My false sense of victory collapsed instantly. I thought I knew the whole story. I thought my checklist was almost complete. But the text from Dad opened a door I never knew existed. I whispered out loud in the dark, asking the empty room who Michaels really was. The name from Vivian's old text message suddenly took on a new meaning. I had assumed Michaels was a lawyer because I was a paralegal and I saw everything through the lens of the legal system. But if Michaels was someone connected to Ray, or a fake name for someone else entirely, my whole strategy was flawed. I lay back down on the pillows. My heart hammered against my ribs. The 11 completed steps on my phone suddenly looked completely inadequate. I needed a new step. I had to find Ray Webb. I made a single catastrophic mistake. It happened on Saturday morning. I left my phone resting on the bathroom vanity while I stood under the hot water of the shower. I had forgotten to silence my notifications. A text message from Marlo Davis flashed across the locked screen, confirming that the draft of my petition was ready for review. I did not know he saw it. I did not know he had stood in the steam-filled bathroom staring at the bright screen reading my lawyer's name. I found out on Monday. I pulled my car into the driveway of our townhouse at 5:30 in the evening. Colton usually never made it home before 7. Today his car was already parked in the garage. I unlocked the front door and walked inside. The house was completely silent. It was not a peaceful silence. It was heavy. I walked into the kitchen. The granite counter was empty. The charging cable for the family tablet lay coiled on the stone, but the tablet itself was gone. I turned toward the dining room. My personal laptop sat open on the table. Colton was sitting in the dark living room. He did not have the television on. He was just waiting in the dim light of the setting sun. He looked at me, and his eyes were completely different. There was no fake warmth. There was no gentle concern. His gaze was entirely cold, calculating, and stripped of all pretense. "Marlo Davis," he said. His voice was incredibly low and slow. I looked her up. She is a divorce attorney. "Colton," I started, but he cut me off instantly. "No, it is my turn," he said, standing up. "You have been sneaking around, taking screenshots, opening secret bank accounts. Oh yeah, I found the bank statements tucked in the pocket of that old college blazer in your closet. You have been planning this for weeks." My breath caught in my throat. He had gone through my closet. He had dug his hands into the pockets of the blazer I kept as a reminder of my own ambition. Colton took a step closer. "Who does this, Tara, who lives with their husband, smiles directly at his mother, and secretly builds a case against him, someone married to a man who tells her to leave the restaurant when she catches him on a date," I said. Total silence fell over the room. 5 seconds passed. It was the first time in 5 years I had spoken the absolute truth directly to his face, without softening it, without apologizing, without shrinking back. Colton blinked. He recovered his balance. A date with a coworker. "This is exactly what I said last week. You take your work home with you. You see betrayal in everything because that is all you do all day at that firm. You know what I am calling Dr. Pham. You need serious help." He was running the script. I could hear the structure underneath his words. Deny it was a date. Attack my mental health. Reverse the roles so that he was the victim of a crazy wife. He pulled his phone from his pocket and pressed a button. He put the call on speaker. "Mum," Colton said, his voice instantly shifting to sound deeply distressed. "Tara has been secretly meeting with a divorce lawyer. She has been recording us in our own home." Vivian gasped through the speaker. It sounded perfectly rehearsed. "Oh my God. Colton, honey, I was afraid of this. She has been acting so strange lately. Remember what I told you at dinner? She was playing her part flawlessly." I watched him hold the phone, listening to his mother validate his fabricated reality. For 5 years, my body would have reacted by collapsing into tears, begging him to believe me. Today, my feet stayed firmly planted on the hardwood floor. I reached into my purse and pulled out my car keys. The metal jingled sharply in the quiet room. "I will be at the firm," I said, turning my back to him. "If you walk out that door," Colton threatened, his voice rising in volume. I stopped with my hand on the brass doorknob. I looked over my shoulder. "You will," what he opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, he did not have an answer. I left. The storm did not break until Wednesday afternoon. It was 2:15. I stood behind the tall wooden reception desk at Whitfield and Krauss, holding a yellow highlighter over a stack of printed emails. 3 separate clients sat in the waiting area, flipping through magazines. The receptionist answered a call and then looked up at me, her eyes wide with sudden panic. She pressed the intercom button. "Tara, your husband is in the lobby." My hand stopped moving. The yellow highlighter slipped from my fingers and bounced off the desk, rolling onto the carpet. Colton had never visited my office. Not once in 5 years. Now he was standing in the lobby of a family law firm. He pushed through the glass double doors. He looked massive in the quiet space, wearing his dealership polo shirt, his teeth flashing in a brilliant, terrifying smile. But his eyes were like stone. He spotted me immediately. "Tara," he announced. His voice was booming, designed to echo off the walls. "We need to talk. Right now." The three clients looked up from their chairs. The receptionist froze with her hand hovering over her keyboard. "My wife has been acting erratically," Colton declared to the entire room. He pointed a finger at me. "She has been stealing screenshots from my phone. She is opening secret bank accounts. She is meeting with lawyers behind my back. She is completely obsessed with these cases." He swept his arm toward the stacks of client files on the reception desk. "It is destroying her mental health." He executed it perfectly in public. He turned toward the shocked receptionist, dropping his voice into a soft, concerned whisper. "Performance mode. I am so sorry about this disruption. I am just worried about her. She reads these awful divorce files all day long, and now she thinks I am some kind of monster." I stood frozen in the doorway of the inner office. Every instinct I had been taught told me to keep the peace, to avoid making a scene, to lower my head. But the paralegal inside my brain was taking meticulous notes. The heavy door to the senior partner office swung open. Nina stepped out into the hallway. She did not rush. She did not look angry. She walked with the calm, measured pace of a woman walking into a courtroom she already owned. She held client file 47 in her hand. The thick folder was packed with red tabs and bright yellow highlights. Nina placed the file onto the reception counter right in front of Colton. She flipped it open to the flagged page. "Mr. Webb," Nina said smoothly, "this is a law firm. We have security cameras recording every single word you have said in the last 90 seconds. We also have 3 clients sitting right there as direct witnesses." Colton glanced up at the black dome camera mounted on the ceiling. He looked over at the waiting area. One of the clients was holding her phone up, the red recording light clearly visible. Nina leaned forward slightly. "I would highly recommend you leave this building before you hand your wife's attorney any more free material." Colton looked down at the open file on the counter. The bold heading at the top of the page read, "Pattern Analysis." "Your wife flagged this exact behavioral pattern," Nina said, dropping her voice so only he could hear the edge in it. "In 31 depositions. She is very, very good at her job, Mr. Webb." Colton took a slow step backward. The confident salesman's smile vanished completely from his face. He looked past Nina and stared directly at me. It was a look of pure recognition. He did not see a panicking wife. He did not see an easy target. He saw a professional who knew his entire playbook. He turned around and walked out the glass doors without saying another word. The victory felt incredible for exactly 30 minutes. Then the real counterattack began. Colton went straight to his car and texted Vivian. Vivian called Michaels. Michaels was a highly expensive, deeply ruthless attorney. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, my cell phone rang. It was Marlowe. Michaels had filed an emergency motion with the court, a temporary restraining order against me. The motion claimed I was emotionally unstable, that I was accessing private devices without authorization, and that I was an immediate flight risk with marital assets. The judge signed the temporary order. I was legally barred from entering my own townhouse for 72 hours. I stood in the break room holding my phone. My stomach plummeted. I was locked out of my own life. Step 12 on my checklist was to secure safe housing. I had completely failed. I had nowhere to go. That night at 11 o'clock, the law firm was dark and completely silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning vents. Nina had given me permission to stay in her office. I lay on the long leather sofa where hundreds of broken clients had sat and cried. Now it was my turn. I pulled my old college blazer over my shoulders to keep warm. Out in the parking lot, my car sat under a street lamp. The groceries from that first Thursday night were still sitting in the trunk, the milk long spoiled. I pulled my phone out and stared at the glowing screen. 11 out of 14 steps complete. The family tablet was sitting back in the townhouse. I knew Colton. I knew he had already wiped it back to its factory settings. The physical evidence in his house was gone. But I had my cloud backup. 47 files uploaded every single night for 2 weeks. I remembered Marlowe confirming the law. A personal backup of a shared family device was completely admissible in court. He could erase the tablet, but my personal Google Drive was mine alone. I stared up at the dark acoustic ceiling tiles. A strange, quiet clarity washed over me in the empty office. I asked myself a question. Why did I need the checklist? I did not wonder why he cheated. I understood the entitlement and the enabling mother perfectly. I wondered why I needed 14 steps of documented time-stamped evidence, just to leave a man who treated me like dirt. For 5 years, I had recognized the pattern of deny, attack, and reverse in every single legal deposition I touched. But the moment I walked through my own front door and he told me I was making things up, I believed him. I believed him because I trusted the system more than I trusted myself. I believed that if I just followed the rules and gathered enough proof, someone else would validate my reality. I needed the checklist to give me permission to trust my own gut. I realized lying under my old blazer that the feeling in my stomach outside the restaurant was enough. I did not need a piece of paper to prove I was not crazy. I just needed to believe it myself. I sat up in the dark. The leather sofa creaked beneath me. I opened the notes application on my phone. I looked at the bold text at the top of the screen. Tara's divorce checklist. I tapped the screen. I did not delete the list. I highlighted the title and pressed the backspace key until the words disappeared. My thumbs moved quickly over the digital keyboard, typing out a brand new heading. File T. Chen versus C. Web. It was not a diary entry anymore. It was not a desperate plea for validation. It was a case file. And I was the best paralegal in the entire building. I set the phone down on the glass coffee table. I would call Marlowe first thing in the morning. We were filing the petition. I called Marlowe first thing on Thursday morning. We filed the fault divorce petition in the county courthouse. The grounds were adultery, and the dissipation of $12,000 spent on Peyton over 3 months. Marlowe also filed an aggressive motion to dissolve the temporary restraining order. She presented the evidence of the firm security footage and the witness statements. The judge dissolved the order in exactly 48 hours. But I used those 48 hours. I used my access to the public record databases at the firm. I searched for the name attached to the text message on Colton's phone. I found Ray Webb. Colton's father was living in a small house down in Hattiesburg. I pulled the old divorce records from 22 years ago. I read the scanned pages on my glowing screen and the breath left my lungs. Vivian had used the exact same playbook on Ray. She used the same lawyer named Michaels. She waited for the exact same expiration of a sunset clause. She spun the exact same narrative that drove Ray out of his own home and separated him from his son. Colton was not a monster who invented his own rules. He was a son who had completely internalized his mother's survival tactics. I called the number I found for Ray. The line clicked open. The voice on the other end sounded incredibly tired and rough. He told me he tried to tell Colton for 2 years. He said Colton thinks he is the villain because that is exactly what Vivian taught him. I held the phone to my ear and looked out the window of the law firm. I told Ray I knew. I told him she taught Colton perfectly. My anger slowly shifted into a heavy, suffocating pity. But pity does not change the law. Saturday morning arrived. The restraining order was officially gone. I drove to the townhouse to collect my belongings. Colton had changed the digital smart lock code on the front door, but he forgot about the physical deadbolt. It was a perfect irony. I was the one who installed the smart home system when we moved in. He changed the digital password. I walked right in using my old brass key. I stepped into the kitchen. Colton was sitting at the granite island. Vivian sat right beside him. She had come down to act as his reinforcements. Peyton was nowhere to be seen. That was the first clear sign she had retreated. Vivian opened the conversation. She leaned forward and put on her best performance. Her voice was dripping with gentle maternal concern. She told me to sit down because they were so worried about me. I did not sit. I looked right at her. I told her I knew she had been worried about me ever since the sunset clause expired. I said it was very consistent of her. Complete silence filled the kitchen. The perfectly constructed mask on Vivian's face cracked. Her eyes darted away. Her manicured fingers tightened around her coffee mug. Colton jumped in instinctively. His voice was fast and loud. He demanded to know what I was talking about. He asked what sunset clause. I looked at him. I let my voice drop into the exact tone I used when reading a deposition back to a client. Calm. Professional. Unshakable. I told him I meant the prenuptial sunset clause that expired exactly 2 months before he started dating Peyton, the one his mother texted him about on March 14th at 9:47 in the evening. I pulled my phone from my pocket and read the exact quote out loud. I asked him if he had talked to Michaels yet. Colton looked at Vivian. Vivian stared at me. Her voice shifted from concerned mother to absolute ice. She told me I had no right to read private messages. I replied that they were on a shared family tablet in a kitchen that I paid for. Colton started waving his hands. He raised his voice again. He said this was insane and that I was twisting everything. He claimed his mother was talking about something else entirely. I took a step forward. I looked him dead in the eyes. I told him I process 31 of these cases a year. I told him I know the script by heart. I pointed at him and said he was on the denial stage right now. I predicted that in about 10 seconds he would switch to the attack stage and tell me my job was making me paranoid. Then he would reverse the roles and tell me I was the one destroying our family. I told him I had seen it so many times I could set a timer to his words. Colton opened his mouth to speak. Then he closed it. He closed it because I had just predicted the exact words sitting on his tongue. He had no script for this moment. I turned my attention back to Vivian. I told her I had talked to Ray. All the colour drained out of Vivian's face. She looked completely pale. I told her Ray explained the sunset clause in their prenuptial agreement from 22 years ago. I noted they used the exact same lawyer, the exact same playbook. I told her she taught Colton everything he knows, but the problem was, she taught him on the wrong wife. Colton looked frantic. His voice cracked as he stepped toward me. He said, none of this mattered. He smiled, a desperate, hollow smile. He told me he wiped the tablet entirely. He said I had absolutely nothing. I did not blink. I unlocked my phone and opened the cloud storage application. I turned the bright screen around and placed it flat on the granite counter. 47 digital files, color-coded, time-stamped. I told them I backed everything up. Every single night. For 2 solid weeks. I explained it was a paralegal habit. We always back up evidence to a separate, secure location. Colton stared down at the glowing screen. He saw the organization. He saw the cross-referenced folders. He realized in that exact moment that I had not just taken a few angry pictures. I had built an entire legal case against him. Vivian looked at the screen. Her expression did not change, but her hand slowly slid off her coffee mug and rested flat on the counter. It was the quiet, subtle movement of a woman who finally realized she had lost. I looked at Colton. The anger was completely gone. I spoke softly, and I meant every single word. I told him I was not doing this because I hated him. I told him I was doing this because for 5 years I sat across the desk from women who lived my exact life, and I helped them. I told him I never helped myself, but that ended today. I dropped the thick manila envelope containing the served divorce petition onto the counter right next to his hand. I walked out to the garage. I grabbed the 2 heavy suitcases I had packed the week before. I walked out the front door, and I never looked back. As the door clicked shut, I caught one final glimpse through the hallway mirror. Colton was not looking at me. He was staring at his mother with a completely new expression on his face. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and opened the contact labeled Dad. 2 weeks later, the morning sun poured into my office at the law firm. It was 8:30. I sat at my desk by the bright window. A brand new client file sat open on my blotter. A new divorce, a new story, but today felt different. I reached down and opened my bottom desk drawer. I reached past the yellow highlighters. The folded application for the state bar exam was still sitting in the dark corner. It had been there for 3 years. I pulled it out. I placed it on the desk and smoothed out the heavy crease down the center. I picked up a blue ballpoint pen. I wrote today's date in the empty box at the top of the page. I did not fill out the rest of the form yet. I just left it sitting open and perfectly flat on my desk. For the first time in 3 years, it was out in the light. Nina walked past my door. She paused. She looked at the open application on my desk. She did not say a single word. She just smiled, tapped her knuckles twice against the wooden doorframe, and kept walking down the hall. Later that night, I sat on the floor of my new studio apartment. It was 450 square feet of space. The desk and chair were hand-me-downs borrowed from the firm's storage closet. The air did not smell like Chanel No. 5. There was no sound of Colton's heavy footsteps on the stairs. I sat on the cheap carpet with my back leaning against the baseboard. I was eating spicy pad thai straight out of a cardboard takeout box. My laptop was open on the floor, glowing brightly as I scrolled through registration dates for bar exam preparation courses. My cell phone buzzed on the floor. It was a text from Marlo. She wrote that Colton's attorney had officially filed a response. He was contesting the grounds. She warned me it would take months to settle. I set down my fork. I picked up the phone and typed back. I told her I knew and that I process these files every day. I opened my notes application. I scrolled down to the file named File T, Chen vs. C, Web. I looked at the 14 steps. Step 14 was checked off. 14 out of 14 complete. The case was fully built. I tapped the screen and created a brand new note. I titled it, Bar Exam Preparation. I typed out Step 1, Register for Course. I typed out Step 2, Build Study Schedule. I stared at the screen. I highlighted the numbered steps. I pressed the Delete key until the screen was completely blank beneath the title. I did not need a checklist anymore. I did not need a step-by-step guide to prove I was moving forward. I typed one single sentence. I am going to be a lawyer. I set the phone face down on the floor. I looked out the small window of my apartment at the glowing streetlights below. I was no longer standing on a sidewalk, looking through a glass window into a life that did not belong to me. I was sitting inside my own life, looking out at the world. Sometimes you find yourself standing outside the window of your own life, looking in at a reality that feels completely wrong. You feel the cold seep into your bones, but the person you love looks you right in the eye and tells you it is a warm summer day. When that happens over and over again, you stop trusting the chill in your own skin. You start looking for proof. You build checklists. You gather receipts, text messages, and screenshots, hoping that if you collect enough physical evidence, you will finally earn the right to say you are in pain. But this story teaches us a profound and entirely practical truth. You do not need a legally binding dossier to validate your own heartbreak. The moment you have to start treating your marriage like a crime scene, you already have all the answers you need. The manipulation tactic you witnessed here is not a dramatic plot twist. It is a documented behavioral pattern where a person will deny the facts, attack your character, and reverse the roles of victim and offender. It is highly effective because it weaponizes your own deep empathy against you. When they casually deny the reality you saw with your own 2 eyes, your brain panics. When they attack your mental health or call you paranoid, you instantly go on the defensive to prove you are a reasonable person. And when they reverse the roles, suddenly playing the wounded partner who is deeply concerned about your erratic behavior, you drop your own valid anger to comfort them. You end up apologizing for catching them in a lie. It is a terrifying loop designed to keep you exhausted and constantly working to fix a problem you never created. Breaking free from that exhausting loop does not require you to outsmart them or build an airtight legal case. It requires you to stop participating in the debate entirely. You have to realize that you are arguing with someone who is completely committed to misunderstanding you. They are not confused about the truth. They are just trying to make sure you are. Tara spent 5 years documenting this exact pattern in other people's lives while remaining blind to her own. Her true liberation did not come when she served the divorce papers or confronted her mother-in-law. It came during that quiet night in the dark office, when she finally decided to trust her own intuition. She realized her gut feeling outside that restaurant was all the evidence she ever needed. You have that exact same intuition, living inside of you right now. If you are constantly shrinking your own voice to keep the peace, or if you find yourself secretly recording conversations just to prove to yourself that you are not losing your mind, it is time to put the checklist down. You do not need an audience or a confession to declare that you deserve better. You just have to decide it for yourself. Walking away from a life you spent years building is incredibly hard, but the quiet peace you find in a room of your own is worth every single tear. Have you ever found yourself keeping a secret record just to hold on to your sanity in a relationship? And what was the exact moment you finally realized your own intuition was all the proof you needed to walk away?